lives and how His timing is perfect. It all started when my husband Bill and I, my daughter Jennifer, 14, and my son James, 13, were visiting Bill's family in Fresno for Thanksgiving. This was in 2014. That evening, after having a nice Thanksgiving with the family, we were in a motel room in Fresno, and all of a sudden, around 2 in the morning, my son James started moaning, and the bed was shaking, and we realized something was wrong. We thought he was having a bad dream. Turns out he was unresponsive, and so we took him to the hospital, and upon arriving at the hospital, finally the seizure stopped. And he was fine after that the next day, but the hospital, when they released him, said make sure that he goes and sees his doctor and follows up with further testing. In the next couple months, we started testing, and he had an EEG, a CAT scan, and 2 MRIs. And in February, they determined he had a brain tumor. So we met with the surgeon at Children's Hospital, and he came in and said, "You won't believe this." He says, "But this is the best surgery a surgeon could wish for." He says, James's brain surgery, first of all, is in the temporal lobe of his brain, which is the best possible place to have a brain tumor if you have to have a brain tumor. He said it's also on the right side, which is the best possible of the 2 sides to have it. It's on the outside edge, which means that I don't have to dig deep into the tissue, good tissue to get to it. He says it's smaller than a centimeter, so it's really small, and it looks like it's smooth around the edges. So that means that it's probably not cancerous, but we won't know until we go in and find out. As he said, we can leave it in, and we can watch it and see if it grows, but he says he's more likely to have more seizures if we do that, or we can have it removed now while it's small. So after much prayer, we decided to go ahead and have the surgery. So on March 30th of 2014, James went into Children's Hospital. We put it on the prayer chain at church, and he went through fine without any complications. The surgery was easy for the surgeon, and he was only in the hospital 3 days. And so that was truly a blessing. And he had to be quiet for 2 weeks after that, and the timing was perfect because he only missed the first week of school. The second week was spring break, so it worked out beautifully. Careful for 3 months, April, May, and June, so he couldn't do a lot of PE and major sports. But by the time summer came, he was able to go swimming, and after 6 weeks after surgery, he was able to go bowling. And by August, he was able to start soccer in the fall like he normally does every year and play on a soccer team. So he didn't miss any of his normal regular activities. So it was a blessing. Our faith was tested during this time, but God was in control. And my point is, He was control, first of all, that we were all in the motel room when this happened. Otherwise, we might not have known anything was wrong with his brain. Second of all, this tumor was in the exact location it needed to be. And because of that, they were able to get it really easy. In my small group Bible study at Morning Feast, I had a number of nurses that were in my Bible study, and they encouraged me. And then last but not least, a year later, this last April, James had another MRI, and everything was normal. There's no sign of that tumor going back. And so we just thank God for this wonderful opportunity that He showed our family, increased our faith as a family and my son's faith. And I know that I can trust Him for anything that happens in our family in the future.
Hi, my name is Jane Nice, and I'd like to share with you the story of my sister, Mary Murphy. She was my younger sister, and she had a very hard life. She struggled with a lot of loneliness, and she just had a hard life. A couple of years ago, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had surgery and chemotherapy and radiation, and it seemed like she was doing pretty good. And the great thing about Mary was, even though she had a lot of struggles, in her life she remained sweet and caring and kind, and she was a really nice lady. Spring this year, she started having a lot of coughing, and she just didn't feel well. She just felt like she couldn't breathe, and so the doctors thought it was allergies, so they gave her lots of different allergy medications, and none of them seemed to be working. So it was in June, at one point she just felt she really couldn't breathe at all, so she actually called 911. So they took her to the hospital, and she was admitted, and they discovered that she had lung cancer. It had metastasized from her breast to her lungs, and also some other places on her body. So it was really shocking. So she was in there about a week, and then we went to see her oncologist, and we were told the results of her CAT scan was that she only had like 6 months to live. It was very shocking and very hard. And so for like the next month, she was in and out of hospitals, and she was on oxygen at home full time. It was very hard watching her. So then about July, the third week in July, she was having severe breathing problems, and she went back in the hospital, and she had to be on oxygen full time, like a full face oxygen mask which covered her nose and mouth, which actually forced the air down her lungs because she couldn't breathe. Her lungs were filling up with fluid. The doctor said if she tried chemotherapy she might live longer, so she wanted to try it, but she was going downhill fast, so they told her that wasn't an option anymore. So after about a week in the hospital, she went to hospice to live out whatever time she had left. And so she loved the Lord, but she didn't feel like she was really ready to leave this earth yet. She didn't want to leave her family and friends. But unbeknownst to her, my sisters and I were praying that the Lord would take her and not let her linger and suffer. So we had one more sister she needed to see, who was coming down from Oregon with her family to visit Mary. And then we just prayed that the Lord would take her after that. So my sister Carol, she came down Thursday, it was July 28th. Had a nice visit. Mary was very clear-minded. She wasn't on any medication. She was very clear-minded. So they had a nice visit. So my sister left for her hotel, and that same night the phone rang, and it was the hospice, the nursing home that she was in that did hospice. They called me and tell me that she had passed away. And so it was like, wow, God really answered the prayer, right on time the same night after she had seen my sister. So it was devastating, as always, losing a loved one. So the next day, Joel and I, my husband, we went to pick up her personal belongings at the nursing home. And I didn't want to go into her room, so Joel went in, and he was talking to her hospice roommate, and this was the story that she told him. She said that she was also a Christian. She was a sweet little old lady, very with it. She wasn't, Alzheimer's or anything. She was really cute. We used to talk about how we always like to be awake late at night, and she was awake late last night. And she said it was around midnight, and she thought she heard Mary get out of bed. And she said Mary was just talking and talking, and she realized that she could hear Mary talk, so she was concerned because you couldn't hear Mary talk with her oxygen mask on. You had to get right up to her mask. I mean, she even had to lift it up just to get little bites of food. So she wore that full time. She knew she couldn't take it off or get out of bed. So she said Mary was talking away to nobody there. And so she pulled herself into her wheelchair and she went back to the nurse's station. But by the time they got back, Mary had passed away. And so Joel said, did you hear anything that she was saying? And she said, well, she was talking a lot, but the only things I could hear her saying was several times, she said, I want to go home. I want to go home. And so it was such a blessing to hear that, because I knew that she wanted to go home and to her real home in heaven, because she knew she was never going back to her apartment, and she knew she couldn't get out of bed. She had been bedridden for weeks, and she also knew that she could not breathe without that mask on. So I know in my heart that either the Lord came or sent his angels to take her away to heaven. It was just such a comfort and blessing to know she was ready to go, and just that he came and got her. It was just beautiful, and I'm very thankful for that, even though of course it's hard to lose a loved one. In conclusion, I want to share 2 Bible verses. The first one starts with John 14:2. It says, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place, I will come back and take you to be with me, so that you may be where I am. And the last one is Psalm 116:15, and I love this one. It says, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. And I say, amen, and praise you, Lord, for your faithfulness.
Hi, I'm Catherine Yuan. Today I'm going to tell you how I ended up at the women's retreat of Hope Center last year. Well, I have had a difficult relationship with my mother. Because of that, I avoided to be vulnerable with other people, especially women. So I never considered going to a women's retreat. However, last year when the women's retreat information started appearing on the church announcement, I had this bad feeling that God wanted me to go. So I fought back. First, I told God that, well, the women's retreat started on a Friday, and there was absolutely no way I could take Friday off from work. Then I found out that actually the retreat didn't start until 7 p.m. on Friday, so I really didn't have to take the time off from work. Then I came up with a different excuse. I said, well, because my husband and I just got a 20% pay cut, there was no way I could afford it. Then I found out that there was actually a payment plan that was very workable. So eventually I had to submit to God. So I said, fine, I'm going to sign up. One day after the church service, I went to the back counter and I signed up for the retreat. I was filling out the form. I was crying. I was shaking. I was so scared. I knew that God was going to make me a better person, but I was so scared of going through the pain during the process. So at that moment, out of nowhere, Suzette appeared. She found out what was going on, and she graciously invited me to room with her and also Heather Pritchett at the retreat. And they turned out to be like the perfect roommates for me. So within 10 minutes of saying yes to God, he took care of all the details for me. And I had a great time at the retreat. Yes, I did cry a lot, but I also made such great connections with so many women that I decided to come to Morning Feast because I didn't want that connection to stop. So the lesson I learned from this experience is that I had a bottom line with God. For 95% of my life, I tell God, you know what, I will submit, I will be a better person, I'll be a Christian. But for this 5% of my life, it was so painful that I don't want you to touch it, I don't want you to acknowledge it, just leave it alone, and that's my bottom line with you. So when he came to knock on the door to try to help me out with this 5%, I was so caught up in my fear that I had forgotten that he is my heavenly Father. And he knows me better than I know myself, so he wasn't going to let this experience break me. But I forgot all about that because I was just scared. So today, if you are like me, who also have a bottom line with God. When the day comes and when God knocks on that door to try to help you with that 5%, I pray that you remember my story and find comfort in it, that God's going to carry you through. You will be fine, and all He wants for you to do is to say yes to Him. Thank you.